Chair, it's 6 o'clock now. If you're happy, we'll start the stream.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this particular meeting of the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. It's Wednesday, the 20th of March, and it's 6 o'clock. Before we get going, I'll start with the announcements, if I can. So if I can remind everybody present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and then this recording will be archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if they're sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly. When subsequently invited to address by myself, please then press your activation button in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and aware that there will be a small time lag and that you do not need to press the button again. The response of the system isn't instant. If the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this isn't possible, please bring this to my attention or the Democratic Services Officer. Once you have participated, please remember to turn your activation button off as not to delay other participants from coming onto the screen and to avoid background noise when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to alert myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interested item has concluded. Please do not close your browser window, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person, they'll be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interested item, and then they'll be invited back into the room as appropriate. If the Welsh language is spoken during the meeting, then a simultaneous translation will be available to listen to. For meeting participants in the council chamber, a translation receiver and headset is available at each seat for you to use at the appropriate time. For remote meeting participants, a language selection is available for your use under the audio settings tab on the left-hand side of your screen for you to use at the appropriate time. The translation will also be audible on the live stream for the meeting for any persons who are observing only. Thank you. So if we move on to the agenda and part one, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please, Mark?
Just to say, Chair, I've not had any apologies through as yet. I think the majority of members are either in the chamber or online. I think we might be waiting just for 1 or 2 members or so.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Agenda item 2 then, these are minutes of the one extraordinary meeting that was held on the 15th of February 2024 and also the meeting held on the 21st of February 2024. Hopefully all members have had a chance to review both sets of minutes. So if we are happy and content that these are correct and an accurate record of both meetings, can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hanks. And can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Brilliant. Okay, so if we move on to agenda item 3, these are our declarations of interest and the nature of such interest. Do we have any of those tonight, please? No? Okay, that's great. So before we crack on with the main body of our agenda items, I just want to consult committee on a recommendation that I've been given by Councillor Johnson. And this is in connection with the agenda item 8, which was the Oracle implementation update. Committee has been waiting for some time for this report, but Councillor Johnson felt strongly enough to contact me to ask, considering the importance and the issue in itself, that we defer this particular item to an extraordinary meeting so that we can have a single topic meeting and provide further debate. So it's really over to Councillor Johnson, or hang on, Councillor Haynes, I think you've just come in. Would you like to support or disagree with that recommendation?
I was just going to add something to that recommendation, if I may, that the original,
Yes, certainly.
if we do it, that the original contract is brought across to it, so we have the full information of what it was supposed to be in the first place. Because one of the things I've noted in reading the report is that we don't know the starting point. We only know the mid and the end point. And it would be useful if we're going to have an extraordinary meeting to have all information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I perfectly support that. I think it would be a good opportunity then for any information that you feel, or that all committee feels, would assist in our scrutiny. We can then, if we are going to defer this meeting, request that further information. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Jay. I'll just provide a moment for everybody to wear their headphones. I think everyone's okay here in the chamber. Everybody can hear? Great, okay. Thank you very much, Jay. I read the papers last week and over the weekend, and I noted the number of recommendations which form part of item 8, 59 lessons learned, 38 priorities which have been included as part of the report, and I thought it would be worth, after having waited so long for this report, to have an extraordinary meeting to be able to discuss this in the depth and giving it the time that it needs in the context of work which has happened with the new software system to replace Wookiees, which was mentioned in the governance committee recently. I think including this item as part of the general agenda, which is a busy agenda again tonight, I think we won't get enough time to discuss this in the detail it deserves and the work deserves. I agree with Councillor Haynes around adding any details from the beginning of the contract. Perhaps it would be worth us having a presentation as part of the item, as part of the meeting, if the committee does agree with the proposal to defer until an extraordinary meeting to do this. Thank you to the Chair for considering the request, and hopefully we'll be able to have a separate meeting to discuss this and use our time this evening to go through the rest of the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And yes, I do support your recommendation. And I think a further recommendation, if committee is mindful to defer of a presentation and to request further information so that we can have a full picture on where we started from with the original contract for this. That would be definitely advantageous. Do we have anyone else who would like to ask any more questions about this proposal, or are we prepared to accept the recommendation and move? Tom, would you like to come in?
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Chair. Just to say thank you to elected members for the suggestion, and also to Councillor Haynes and Councillor Johnson in terms of the way and the format that you'd like to take the item. We have prepared a presentation, but taking Councillor Haynes's point, we'll make sure that the chronology of that presentation starts right at the very beginning of the project, and perhaps, Chair, if the committee are minded to defer the item, and we'll obviously work with Democratic Services colleagues to schedule your extraordinary meeting. If there is any further information that members would like to see, we'll communicate the kind of timeline for when we'd need that request to make sure that we've got enough time to do it. But yeah, no, obviously happy from an officer perspective to do the item justice.
Thank you. Okay, so Mark?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to be clear in terms of the wording, if it is a single item matter, it will be a special meeting. It's just because in the Constitution, a special meeting is a one item agenda. If it's an extraordinary, that's obviously there's a number of items that need to be looked at the same time. So in terms of recommendation, if committee are happy, we'll recommend a special meeting just to focus on this item.
That's great, thank you. So I am ready then to move on this, and my recommendation is that we defer the debate for the Oracle implementation update. We are deferring so that we can have a special meeting so we can talk about this and this issue alone. And the recommendation includes that we have the presentation that Tom says he's already brought to this meeting, but will include the further chronology of where this came from. Councillor Haynes wanted to see some work on the original contract so that we can look at that too. And I think that's it. So do we have a hand to move on this item now, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And Councillor Franks, are you supporting, or did you want to not support? Or did you just want to ask a question?
No, I'm showing a hand to support the proposal.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Thank you. So we've moved on that one. Thanks ever so much, everyone. If we can now go back then to agenda item 4. This is the report of the Director of Corporate Resources. This is our digital strategy review from Fergal Glamorgan. This has come from Audit Wales. And I think we've got, Tom, have we got Ian with us today? Do we have Audit Wales to take us through the report?
Yes, I can take you through that.
We do. Oh, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we did this review because digital is key to delivering a wide range of council services in a more economic, efficient and effective way. And it's an important means of councils delivering their wellbeing objectives and carrying out sustainable development. It's a thematic review. We did it all 22 councils in Wales. Our main audit question was, in developing its digital strategy, has the council acted in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle and put in place proper arrangements to secure value for money in the use of its resources? So our audit questions and audit criteria are set out in Appendix 1 of the report. But just to recap the areas we examined, they were whether the digital strategy is informed by a good understanding of current and future trends, whether the council has a clear vision of what it wants to achieve through the use of digital technology, whether the council's working effectively with the right people and partners to design and deliver its digital strategy, whether the council has resourced delivery of its digital strategy so it can deliver long-term and preventative benefits, whether the council's monitoring and reviewing progress, and whether the council's learning lessons from how it works. So our main finding was that the council is taking the Sustainable Development Principle into account in producing its digital strategy, and it's developing arrangements to deliver that strategy, but the monitoring arrangements are underdeveloped. So there's a lot of positives in the report. These include the Council's good understanding of its current situation from internal evidence sources that have informed its strategic approach to digital. So, for example, it commissioned work to help develop its digital strategy, and it held a range of staff workshops to capture the views of different directorates. There's a clearly articulated vision for digital, and there appears to be a good understanding within the Council of what it is trying to achieve through its use of digital technology. There was a good approach to involving others in developing its digital strategy. The strategic approach to digital is backed by funding to take it forward. The Council had reviewed its previous digital strategy and is committed to reviewing its new one. There were some areas where we identified the Council could take actions to further strengthen its strategic approach to digital, and we made 5 recommendations in total. They're on page 5 of the report, but I'll briefly summarise them. The first one is about the Council ensuring it takes account of external sources to inform its strategic approach to digital. We found that there was scope for the Council to build on its comprehensive use of internal evidence sources and to make more use of external evidence sources, and our audit criteria includes example of those. The second recommendation is that the Council should review how its strategic approach to digital impacts on the objectives of other public bodies. So there was a lot of evidence the Council had considered the wider impacts across the Council and considered the national wellbeing goals, but it hadn't fully considered how delivery of the digital strategy will impact on what other public bodies are trying to achieve. The third recommendation is about the Council ensuring it has considered opportunities to collaborate in the delivery of its digital strategy, to identify opportunities to share knowledge or expertise or resources that may improve value for money. The Council certainly recognises the importance of that, and there are opportunities for the Council to pursue that as it takes its digital strategy forward. The fourth recommendation is that the Council should identify any savings it's aiming to make from the strategy and ensure that performance information used to monitor it enables it to fully understand the impact of the Council's investment in digital. At the time we did this work, the report is dated November, but we did the bulk of the fieldwork in last summer. So at the time we did this work, because of the position the Council was in terms of producing its new digital strategy, it was still in draft at that point. The Council had more work to do to identify any savings it intended to make through its strategic approach, and there was also work to do to develop measures to help the Council monitor its strategic approach to digital. And the final recommendation was about developing arrangements for identifying and sharing lessons learned from its approach to its digital strategy. That aspect wasn't clear at the time we did our field work. You'll see from the papers for this item that the Council have completed an organisational response form, and that sets out how the Council intend to respond to our recommendations. We're satisfied as Audit Wales that findings and recommendations have been properly considered. And so, yeah, that's just a brief summary of the report, but I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian, for that that presentation. I've just got a very general one before I bring Councillor Carroll in. I know you said that this was an all Wales review, so you did this on 22 authorities. So I'm just curious to see what can the Vale of Glam Council actually learn from other reviews that you've done? Do you have a kind of like an overall report which will show for reference so we can learn from each other? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. There's going to be a national report which will bring together a summary of all our findings. There's individual reports published on our website, but we are going to pull that together into a summary report. So that should hopefully, point to any good practice we can and sort of summarise our findings from across the piece.
Is this for me to come in now?
Yes, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Please come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm not sure if these questions would be better directed at people from within the council rather than Audit Wales, because I was going to focus on the council's organisational response, if that's okay. But thank you for the report. It was very informative, and it'll be beneficial for us to have the guidance that's provided and to have the opportunity to address some of the recommendations. Firstly, in relation to recommendation 1, the use of external sources, I just wanted to ask about artificial intelligence, which I know is something I've raised before in relation to the digital strategy, and I know that action has been taken on that and that it's now been included in the strategy, which I'm grateful for. But I just wonder if it's a bit of a missed opportunity that we didn't suggest bringing in an external source to advise on AI. The only reason I suggest that is this is a very new technology that presents many opportunities and does have the potential to enable us to provide our services much more efficiently and improve productivity. And of course, if that happens, we can then potentially redeploy resources towards other things such as road resurfacing, putting more resources towards social care, for example, and that would be of benefit to residents. So I just wonder whether perhaps seizing on external expertise when it comes to the opportunities that AI brings and how we could potentially implement them in the Vale would be something we could look at, and whether it would be worth including that within that recommendation to consider bringing in some expertise on that, because with it being a new technology that's developing very fast, it's understandable that the council probably doesn't have that level of expertise within its existing structures because it's so new. I'm not criticising you for the fact that you don't have it, because 5 years ago you wouldn't have been expected to have it. But I just wonder if that's an opportunity that we could perhaps explore.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Yes, I'll bring Tom. Would you like to come in on that one?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you to Councillor Carroll for the recognition of the change to the strategy during the consultation. I'm grateful to him for raising the issue of artificial intelligence. I'd be really happy to supplement the recommendation that is in here in terms of the organisational response. We could certainly say that we would look to work with external partners. I'd like to give some assurance to Councillor Carroll as well. We have, since the strategy was completed and reported and this work undertaken, recruited a head of digital. We undertook that through a really rigorous external recruitment process and have acquired somebody with some really great skills in this area. But I do think it's really important, and it also shows how making judicious use of external resource can be useful when we don't need to keep it constantly within the organisation. But one of the things that I'm working with the head of digital on now is looking at a future model for digital services, so that we actually do start to build some of these skills into the workforce. So you'll see that coming forward as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. And just one further follow-up, if I may, Chair. It's in relation to recommendation 4, value for money. I appreciate that we're now going to have an extraordinary meeting to discuss the issue of Oracle, but I think given that there are lessons to be learnt in terms of procurement and delivering projects to budget from that experience, perhaps we could make a reference to those lessons in the recommendation as well, again to show that we are taking on board the things that the council has learned, and hopefully ensure that in future we manage projects better so that such waste isn't experienced. Not waste, sorry, such budgetary issues are experienced.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I've got one other quick question, if I can, if that's okay. And it really was one of the recommendations from Audit Wales anyway, and that was that we need to develop our horizon scanning. So the question is really, well, how are we going to do that? If I can ask that question.
Certainly, Chair. And I wonder if, I think Nikki Johns is on the line, and Nikki, you might be best placed to answer the Chair's question on that one.
No problem at all, and thank you. We work with a number of bodies from the WLGA, from Socratim, Centre for Digital Public Standards. So we have a rich set of resources which allow us to help ensure that we are looking at both the current needs and the wider needs of our residents and Wales itself. So I think we're feeling relatively comfortable that those resources will help us do that as we continue to look at both the short term, long term, and the medium plan, and in context of our corporate plan as well, which gives us an awful lot of insight, and as we reach out more into our resident base to understand their needs. So I'm hopeful that we're in the right place.
Thank you, Nikki. Do we have anybody else with any questions then on the digital strategy review? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Just a moment for those in the chamber. It was interesting to hear from Ian about how this was part of a national review for the 22 authorities, and looking forward to the final report to understand what types of lessons come out of this. And the reason I say this is that this feels to me, sorry, just giving everyone's earphones are not working, so I'm just pausing for a moment. Our digital strategy and this report felt quite abstract for me as somebody who's not a specialist in the field. So in reading this report, I'm not quite sure where we're going in terms of the recommendations and what we do next. Clearly the picture has changed since this happened, as we have appointed Nikki Johns as head of digital, and welcome to the meeting and to the committee. But recommendation 2, talking about how to avoid duplication. I want to know a little bit more about how this works. What types of things are Audit Wales expecting us to do differently in terms of things in future, in terms of how we engage, how we work with other bodies, other partners. So our response, sorry Tom, it just includes a lot of words, and I don't know exactly what exactly is recognise and embracing the need to engage with partners more. Okay, I don't understand exactly what this is in the real world. Is there an example that we can have in terms of how this will work? I understand that the digital strategy is a new one, and I understand that this world is ever changing. But in reading this report from Audit Wales, I can understand the process, but I don't understand the content, if that makes sense. So I would like to have something which would draw out for me exactly what we're expecting to be doing differently as a result of this, rather than we're just going to report this back to Cabinet and we're going to report this back to somebody that we've appointed. So if this could happen either from Ian or from Tom or Nikki, I would appreciate what exactly we intend to do as a result of this. And just one final point. I take it there's a typo in the report on page 2, organisational response, talking about ensuring the head of digital is a member of the SLT, and the completion date is January 22 through 23, which is last year before the report was written. I take it should be 23, 24. Just to confirm this. But if Tom, Ian or Nikki can explain exactly how we will better collaborate with other bodies and partners to ensure that there's no duplication, because I'm not sure what we're doing to ensure the avoidance of duplication. Hopefully this makes sense for the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I think it's a very good question, and I also would agree with that one. I think, Ian, would you like to help us with some suggestions of what we will be able to do differently to avoid duplication? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to come in there. I think generally it was when we scope these reviews and design them, we are obviously having the Sustainable Development Principle at the forefront and sort of as a sort of framework for our questioning, and the concept of collaboration linked to integration, sort of mutual, different organisation working towards similar goals. It was a general point really that in this space there's 22 councils. They're all at different stages of implementing digital strategies. I'm aware of councils that aren't as far advanced as this one, but they're all at different stages, and not many have long-standing digital strategies really. So we make some suggestions in the report in terms of joint commissioning, procurement, or other sharing or pooling of resources, options the council may want to explore. We don't want to be prescriptive of what councils do in this space, and so there is some overlap with the organisational response form, which we look at and think, has the council properly considered the recommendation? And if it has, and we can follow up on that in due course, we don't want to be too prescriptive about what the council should do in that space. But the general point is there's 22 councils and there's other public bodies working towards similar aims, often looking to do similar things, and just to basically keep options open or explore opportunities for where that pooling of resources or expertise can further digital ambitions across the board.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ian. Nikki, you have your hand up. Would you like to add to that, please? Thank you.
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for allowing me to join, and thank you for the fact that I've obviously just joined. Sorry, so I've obviously had an opportunity to be here for around 4 months now, and as part of that, we've done a kind of like fast review of the situation we're in. That's allowed us to start to pull together a review and create a roadmap, which I'm hoping to bring to you shortly, and Cabinet. Just in terms of kind of like some real life examples, there are a few where we're really, really strong. So in terms of procurement, we have the Connecting Wales framework, which allowed us to buy a number of pieces of technology. Our Granicus system, which is manages our customer relationship management, and also the team telephony that will be going in shortly. And both of those were done on that framework, which allowed us to purchase a better rate. To further that, within the Connecting Wales, as we create kind of patterns of a service, so for example, potholes and that digital process, we're actually able to share the code that goes behind that, and vice versa. So we benefit, and also our other LAs benefit. And then another really compelling opportunity for us is with the WLGA digital. So social care is obviously our largest expenditure. And we are looking as a WLGA, so the 22 of us, to pool resources, and particularly within that, look at some of these more thorny but huge opportunity in things like AI, particularly as we go through social care. we've identified that there are significant opportunities to deliver efficiencies and also better outcomes. So they're just two of the examples where we are collaborating. There are some other very exciting things coming around collaborations with Cardiff and the University Health Board, where there's a leading prototype for the whole of Wales. And again, that's us reaching out, working with other organisations to deliver good outcomes. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nikki. That all sounds really exciting, and I suppose we all have to remember that the audit report is just a moment in time, isn't it? And actually happened last year. And since your appointment and in the last couple of months, there's a lot of work that's been taking place. So so that's really good and exciting to look forward to. Do we have anyone else now who would like to ask any more questions on this report? I see no hands. Okay, that's great. Let's move. Oh, Councillor Franks.
I don't want to be picky, but I'm concerned that you are saying that audit will be exciting. The last thing we want is an exciting. We want a boring, everything's okay, nothing to report. And I say that as a chair of audit in another world. So I hope you don't mind me adding that, but boring is good. Thank you.
Please forgive that comment. I was referring really to Nikki's suggestion of the work that they're doing. So yeah, not necessarily about the audit report itself. Okay then. So if we are ready to move and there are no more questions for this particular report, we'll go to the recommendations. I think our comments today, which are really supportive, and if we can include the comments, if that's possible, because I know that this will go back to governance and audit and then on to cabinet. I know Nikki has mentioned it, and also Councillor Carroll has. We obviously would want to exploit any potential with AI opportunities that there would be. I think we can all remember when ChatGPT came on. Crikey, I think it was probably only about 18 months ago. And now where are we with generative AI? And technology is literally every week there's something new. So I think the horizon scanning and that work, you can't stand still. It's going to continue, isn't it? I think also that there was a typo error in this report that Councillor Johnson has picked up. So as long as we can make sure that that's amended. Then I'll move on to the general recommendations, if that's okay. That was that we've considered the finding from the review of this Council Digital Strategy Appendix A, and also the response to the review findings and Audit Wales's recommendations in Appendix B. And now we are referring this report to Governance and Audit, and thereafter on to Cabinet for their oversight and endorsement of the proposed council actions, which was at Appendix B. So can we have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Lovelock Edwards. Brilliant. Smashing. So we'll move now on to agenda item 5. These are from our references. This is from the annual whistleblowing report, which was heard at Governance and Audit Committee on the 5th of February. I was at that meeting, so just really to make this reference clear that it's not the whole report or the whole policy. The chair wanted our committee to have a look at a recommendation, which was that mandatory training, which is being reviewed, includes an element on whistleblowing. And I think we've got Debbie here now to just clarify that for us. Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah. Yes, Thank you, and very succinctly put. So yes, it is Resolution 5, which is the relevant resolution for this committee, and as mentioned, it was a much larger report with 5 resolutions in total, but that related to the annual whistleblowing report that is presented to Governance and Audit Committee in line with their terms of reference. So it's important just to be aware of that distinction. So Resolution 5 related, or actually provides that the whistleblowing policy be considered as part of the review of mandatory training for staff, and for the matter to be referred to the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. So I think this is just sort of warming you up for the reports that will be coming, I understand, to the next meeting. So I understand the head of HR and OD will be bringing the report then. What I would suggest is that committee tonight notes the reference and then considers it alongside the more detail, or the report on this particular matter, which will be coming shortly to committee, and that will be reviewing training requirements in the whole as part of the people strategy. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Tracy, I think yes, Tracy, would you like to come in on this too?
Yeah, is that okay, Councillor Prothero? Are you okay for me to come in? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
So yeah, I just wanted to add to that, if that was okay. So the intention is to bring a wider report to this committee in April, considering all requirements for required or mandated training across the piece, including consideration from a whistleblowing perspective. I also just wanted to provide some reassurance to this committee in terms of what we've already actioned and done around whistleblowing, broader awareness, particularly from an induction perspective, which was highlighted in this report. So we have very recently being in the last year or so, developed a brand new induction programme that runs across for all new starters in the Vale to increase and add more rigour to the induction process as a whole. As part of that induction process for all new starters to the organisation, from a corporate perspective, there is a specific section on whistleblowing, where a new recruit will have to read and review the whistleblowing policy that's on our StaffNet pages, and tick to say that they have done so and that they have got an awareness from a whistleblowing perspective. It also makes links to the broader StaffNet pages where we send any updates in terms of policy development, and encourages our new starters to review those pages on a regular basis. So I just sought to provide that reassurance that whilst we're bringing a broader paper for consideration for this committee in April, we've already actioned some items specific to whistleblowing from our induction process, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes, that's really good news. Councillor Carroll, would you like to ask any questions on the Resolution 5 for the recommendation? Thank you.
Yeah, it's just a question with regard to the survey responses that were received from staff. I've got to be honest, going through them, you look at some of the comments. I don't trust our employers. I was a whistleblower and lost my council job as a result. I accept that was most probably at another authority. Have audit investigate rather than brush things under the carpet like they have done. I have worked for the council for a long time and had a problem with my line manager and went above her head to my old manager. My old manager said if I had gone above me when I was a manager, I would not have been happy. At present, I do not feel that I would get the support and protection from the council that would be required. There is an underlying hierarchy that exists, and that is dangerous for any organisation. And culture does not encourage it. Complaints are assumed to be vexatious rather than supported. Grievances are not progressed and are routinely ignored. Now, that's just a few I've picked out. I admit that they aren't all like that. But that seems quite damning, if I'm being honest, and I'd just like to ask if the council was expecting to receive responses like that to this consultation and whether it was taken aback to read them.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I just need to caution that we weren't actually being asked to review this policy or any of the other documents. It was to do with the Resolution 5. That was the reference. But you have a question, so I'll put it to Debbie. Debbie, would you like to come in on that one? Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. As was mentioned at the outset, of course, those are issues within the terms of reference of Governance and Audit Committee. But I think it's fair to say, rest assured, there was a detailed discussion, in-depth consideration of these issues. I think the report was under consideration for approximately an hour by that committee. So I wouldn't want this committee to stray into the remits of Governance and Audit Committee, but do rest assured that that was closely considered by that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Councillor Johnson.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Just a pause for people to put the earphones on in the chamber. Just a quick point. I don't know whether it's even worth them putting the earphones on, but like Councillor Carroll, I've read the 48 pages which form part of the report. It wasn't entirely clear to me as a member of the committee that we were only being asked to consider recommendation 5. So I've read the report in the same way that I read every other report. Is it possible in future to make it absolutely clear to us if we're only being asked to agree with a recommendation from another committee and not to discuss all of the issues? Because obviously me, Councillor Carroll, and perhaps everybody else have used up our time going through this in detail, and now we're saying actually we only need to look at one sentence, which is to agree that this is important, and we should consider it as part of the report next month. So just a point for future consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and I completely agree with you. It should be clearer for everybody. Thank you. Debbie, would you like to come in?
Yes, it was just to add that. Oh, I'm getting an echo. I'll carry on. Yes, I've referred this to the officers that the relevant resolution should be highlighted in bold in the usual approach, just so that there's that clarity as to what the particular aspect is that's been referred to the scrutiny committee.
Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, just to say that the main reason it was referred here, because I was also at the Governance and Audit meeting, was regarding the resource implication of mandatory training regarding whistleblowing for all members of staff. That's a heavy resource implication, and because there was a review coming to us anyway, we needed to agree to have that as part of the review. That was the reason mainly why it came here. If you're interested in the full whistleblowing policy, everyone is welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee if they would like to consider that next year at any other point, but that's the main point. Perhaps it's a reminder to start at the start of the report rather than at the end, like I always do. This is a mistake I have made before, but yes, thank you for the point. I think that's a good point, and we can take it on board in future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Any other questions? No? That's great then. So I'm happy to move this matter. So we're noting that the recommendation for Resolution 5 and we will look forward to receiving the full report on the mandatory training review in our next meeting in April. So can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. Brilliant. Okay, let's swiftly move on then to agenda item 6. So this is the Q3 revenue monitoring 2023-24. This is another reference that's come to us from Cabinet from the 29th of February 2024. Do we have Tom to take us through this one, or Gemma, or Matt even? It's Matt. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I don't mind being third in your pecking order.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry.
We've got a brief presentation to introduce this paper, and similarly when we get on to the capital paper that's on the main agenda as well. So if I just nip straight to slide 3 and the key headlines. And given some of the discussions we've had earlier in the year and the budget discussions we've had in recent weeks as well, it won't be surprised colleagues know that we're seeing continuing to see a challenging revenue position for the period Q3 monitoring. The overall position at this quarter shows the continued and sustained pressures that we're having across social care, and that's both children's and adults, and a continuation of pressures on road maintenance and school transport, and those have been persistent for a couple of years, and certainly some of those pressures we've been able to address in the budget set-in process for 24/5. There's also some pressure reported in respect of unrealised savings across the savings programme and across income as well, albeit that the overall level of savings delivery is strong. The overall position reflects unplanned use of reserves of £6.9 million, and that's a very similar number to the one which we presented you at Q2. It's about just a touch over 6.8 at that time. And there's further use of school balances in year. The report sets out a number of environments to reallocate provision for energy costs, and we're continuing to realign budgets with in directorate. So what we've been attempting to do is strip out some of that internal recharging, so there's greater clarity on the direct spends of individual services and directorates across the council. The report also sets out some of the actions we've been taking in year, some of the steps to mitigate the emerging pressures. The next slide puts some of those numbers, sort of replicates the main table from the report. And that highlights what I've just said on the first slide around the pressures across children's and adults and social services. You'll see that £7.6 million variance. That is down from last time, but still a really significant number. And some of that's been mitigated or addressed through use of unplanned use of reserves rather, and also making use of some of the corporate underspends. As I said earlier, the overall level of unplanned use of reserves is pretty stable compared to last time round. So whilst we've seen a slight easing of pressures in social care, there's been an increase in pressures on school transport and highways maintenance. There is some mitigation from policy and corporate resource underspends, and I'll say a bit more about those in detail over the next couple of slides. So there are, whilst the overall budget is the remit of this committee, just a bit of focus on corporate resources and policy budgets. So there has been environment. We've held the energy provision budget corporately and allocated it out during the course of the year as required. So there's been a further environment and transfer of that, and we've made some environments to the corporate resources budgets around central recharges. The outturn for corporate resources is positive. It's a favourable variance of just under £300,000, and that largely relates to the office accommodation budget. And this further detail of that in Appendix D of the report. There are pressures within the budget, though, underlying that favourable variance. So there are some delays in the implementations of the 23-4 savings initiatives, such as the reorganisation of the council office space, which impacts on savings in the Docks office and Contract 1 Vale. There is pressure on the coroner services, and that's a 70k overspend. There's a shortfall on legal services income, and there are additional costs on the annual licensing of Microsoft. And then on a positive vein, in our policy budgets, there's actually a favourable variance of just short of £3.4 million. As you've seen in the previous table, a large proportion of that is being used to offset the emerging overspends across the council, and 385k is actually allocated to offset additional costs associated with putting permanent capacity in children's services ahead of the 24-5 budget setting process. Those favourable variants are set out in the bottom half of this slide. So the council's treasury management investment during 23-4 is really positive, and that's as a result of the base rate rises that have caused difficulties through every other service we have and support. But there's a positive surplus there of £1.15 million, and the treasury team continued to do very well on investments and very low risk investments, and I believe some money was lent out over the last couple of weeks in excess of the base rate. So there are some good interest rate deals out there at the moment. As in previous years, the council's continued its approach of maximising internal borrowing, so using our existing reserves and balances rather than externally borrowing. And as a consequence of that strategy, there's £1.2 million of upside in the current financial year. And then on council tax, the current projection is a surplus of £1 million at year end. That's mainly been driven through historical collection. So there's been some catch up of the collection over the last couple of years. And some of the, we were very conservative around the generation of council tax revenues through empty homes, premiums and new properties. So there's some upside coming through on that as well. Efficiencies. There is there's been a strong performance on the delivery of this efficiencies programme for 23-4, in excess of 85% delivery. And this slide just highlights some of the challenges in that 15%. So learning and skills have some shortfalls, especially around the review of arts provision. There's some shortfall in neighbourhood services, but that's being mitigated by some additional car park income through enforcement, and we're doing a little bit more work to quantify that some more precisely. Whilst social services may not achieve their full target in 23-4, this has been due to the need to handle placement moves very carefully, and the savings are expected to be delivered in full for 24-5, so just a bit of timing issue there. Shortfall in place relates to issues around means testing and also a lack of available contractors to carry out capital work, and also potential applicants delaying applications until the council adopts its new independent living policy. Shortfalls in corporate resources have been mitigated in the year by underspends against other office accommodation budgets, such as the Court Road Depot and rate rebates. And this, obviously, further detail on all of this in Appendix F of the report. final bit on the revenue from me before inviting questions is on reserves. The reserves at the 1st of April were £110 million. They're forecast to be 58 million by the end of the year. And that's that reduction's for a range of reasons. Some of it's planned around capital funding and planned drawdown and transfers between reserves, but we also have the unplanned use of reserves and the drawdown of school reserves as well. So that's all I was going to say as introduction to the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Maybe a little tiny bit more positive than ones we've seen in the past couple of months. So if savings are on target as well, that's a real positive. So in a dark time, a little bit of light, I hope. Do we have any questions then for Matt on the report? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair. Just a few short questions. Obviously, this is the end of Q3, and in a fortnight we will be at the end of the financial year. I don't know if I want you to predict the situation, but obviously we don't have long to go, so it would be interesting to know whether you're expecting any changes. I'm just going to ask a couple of things in terms of process with regards to the report. One thing to ask, is it possible to ensure consistency in terms of the statistics that we see in the tables here? I say this in two senses. One is in the summary on page 1, there's a list of council departments, and they don't quite correspond to the table on page 5 and 6. So I find this difficult to read through and to make sense of all of this, because the summary on page 1 is fairly easy to read, and there's more detail in the table on pages 5 and 6, but it doesn't look like the same numbers to me as I read it, because I would expect, for example, to see figures in blue, the main heading, to be the same ones in both. I don't know if Matt can see. I've opened two windows because it's difficult to see them at the same time, but I can explain it later for consistency. So there's that example. On page 1 you have schools. Aside from learning and skills separately, but then on page 5 you have schools, and then schools, and then a list of other topics which are part of the same figure, which don't appear in the same way on the first page. Perhaps this is a bit complicated to explain, but I'm happy to go through this again if needed with Matt. But I just was hoping for consistency between page 1 and the more detailed table which appears later on. The second point, just for understanding of the tables that we have, page 1 referring to amended budgets, and then page 5 refers to revised budget. Page 5 is revised budget, and then there's another revised budget before the projected outturn. I think there's so much change in year between the original one that we agreed on in March last year as a council and now where we are in quarter 2 and quarter 3, and there are so many changes, and I'm finding it difficult to follow across the year. And I think to some extent I'm drowning in details in this report. I can see each individual topic, but I'm losing the bigger picture. So I need to understand at the moment we're intending to use 23 million of reserves, but only 6.9%, 6.9 unexpectedly. So the rest is planned use. Compared to the original or compared to the revised at the end of quarter 2 or whenever this was revised, because revising helps us to know what the current situation is and any changes in the last quarter, for example, but I'm not sure whether it's helping me to understand where we are compared to where we predicted when the budget was set at the beginning of the year. So I understand the changes and they're detailed enough and transparent enough in terms of where this has come up in throughout the year. And I understand the pressures on us, particularly in social services and as a result of schools. I know we've heard once again that there's no change in terms of the schools who are continuing deficit, the 19 who have set a budget without expecting to come out of it. Obviously, they're a fortnight away from the new financial year, so we're not expecting more detail here, but it would be interesting again to hear how we will solve this in the medium term, as the situation is probably not expected to improve in the new year. And just one last point, because I don't want to go on for too long, but I've raised this in the past in terms of language. So if we go to page 7 and paragraph 2.10, and perhaps I misunderstood the last time I raised this, but because these words are not helping my understanding, it says additional Welsh medium provision due to the increased need in additional Welsh resource bases have been set up in Gwaun and Nant. So if I understand this correctly, this is because of the need to introduce a base for additional learning needs for Welsh language students experiencing challenges with ASD and so forth. If that's the reason why it's not here, could we give it the right label, which is ALN, through the medium of Welsh, because this creates parity between the provisions for pupils attending English medium and Welsh medium schools. That label gives the wrong impression, I think, that this is a Welsh language cost, where in reality this addresses a need that we've identified for children in Welsh medium schools where we've failed them previously. So that label I don't think works for me, and I'd like to see the language changed in future. Thank you, Chair. I think those are my points.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Before I bring Ewan in, Councillor Goodjohn, do you want to come back in, Matt, on any of those? Because there's quite a few points for you to pick up on.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Johnson is asking I jump in just to help him a little bit with the figures there. Just to assist, I think the difference that he's mentioning between learning and skills and schools added up together between the two tables is that 40,000 figure there, the vehement. No, that is 40,000. Yes, that's a 40,000 figure, not 40 million. That's the difference between the two. And between the two schools figures, that's the use of reserves, 1.2 million. So that's the difference there. And just later on to explain as well is finally the housing revenue account in the Environment and the Environment and Housing Directorate. That's not added in the front table just because that's not actually part of the main budget, because that is separate funds from what is included within our council tax. That is entirely to do with rents and does not touch the rest of the budget. So that's why those figures are slightly different. But yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. That's very helpful. Matt, back to you, please.
So the intention is that that the detail in the body of the report does flow consistently into the executive summary at the front of the report. I can't sort of glean this evening in this screen what's slightly out of kilter, but I'll take that back to I'll have a look myself when I leave the meeting and have a chat with you, Councillor Johnson. But the intention is that it should make the report easier to follow. So I'll have a look into that. I guess one of the things we want to do with the report as well is where we are making changes and amendments, that we do those as clearly as possible. We're not trying to trip people up with the report. We are trying to be as transparent as possible, and certainly the majority of the amendments and revisions we've made during this financial year are where we've been trying to take recharging out and have more meaningful figures and budgets to report on, and that to that extent that won't have had an impact on the year-end variances and how we're forecasting pressures. But I'll have a chat with the team about how we avoid making this report more complicated than it needs to be to cover that off. I know a couple of cycles ago we had the discussion about separating out ALN and Welsh immersion, and we conflated those in a single paragraph, hadn't we? But I'll take away this comment that you've made further around that, making sure that where there's a bit of clarity about the where that pressure is generally coming from. On the outturn and how that looks, it's early days, I guess. I know we've just a couple of weeks off from the year end, but it'll take us a little while to get the final outturn position, and that will come through to Cabinet in June. I'm not picking up too much intelligence in terms of these numbers significantly changing from what went to Cabinet last month at the moment. I do know, and this is just relatively marginal in the scheme of things, but obviously helpful in terms of schools, there have been some grants coming through over the last 4 to 6 weeks. So I'd expect that school deficit at year end position to ease back a bit, not potentially in its entirety though. Do recognise that the schools are a pressure for the council, and the operational manager, accountancy, and myself do have a meeting with the director and head of strategy tomorrow afternoon to looking at how we're going to address that, which is a really challenging issue, schools funding.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Councillor Johnson, are you happy with Matt's response? He'll
yes, I'll have a quick chat. I'll have a quick chat with Matt afterwards, just to make sure that people understand exactly what I'm pointing to.
Yeah. I think the consistency in reporting is always an issue, but it's quite an important one because it makes it much easier for us all to see what we're looking at. Anyone else got any other questions on this particular element? Councillor Carroll, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a question in relation to the review of C1V office equipment. I note there's a potential saving of 50,000 included in the report. When we talk about reviewing the office accommodation, I take it that's a reduction on the existing footprint. By how much would you be reducing the accommodation?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Tom, would you like to respond to that?
Certainly, and thank you, Councillor Carroll. I can't give you a square footage answer, but I can give you an answer in terms of the proposal. Committee will remember in the capital programme we've had some money in there for a couple of years to look at the ventilation within the premises that C1V currently are occupying, which is above the leisure centre. It felt a much better use of funds to spend that on relocating them into the civic offices. So the proposal, Councillor Carroll, is that we, by the end of April, will have moved them out of the leisure centre premise altogether and accommodate them within this building as part of an overall reduction of our office accommodation. And we're currently looking at options for how that space will be used in the future.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else with any other questions? Councillor Goodjohn.
Yes, sorry about butting in earlier. I do apologise, Chair. Just to say, with reserves coming down quite heavily, including with the general fund being near its minimum of our policy of 10 million, I do wonder if any work has been done by the finance team regarding cash flow and watching out for what is the danger level of cash flow. Our policy is to remain above 10 million in the general fund, but knowing what is realistic as to how far that can go down before we do begin to have cash flow issues is a concern of mine, because if there is much overspend that is charged to the general fund anymore, we will be at that level. So has any work been done? I asked this to Gemma prior to the meeting, but I'd like to specifically know what work, if any, has been done regarding what level of general fund would we need to be at to start having cash flow issues, and any work to avoid that would be nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. Matt, back to you.
The council's overall cash flow position is really strong. Our day-to-day cash flow as a local authority is positive, and that's due to income flows during the year. You typically have your council tax, government grants coming through in advance of spend, especially ahead of monthly payroll. The overall reserves that we have are underpinned by overall cash is underpinned by a number of reserves, provisions, as well as the general fund balances. So a good, strong position, but we're not complacent though. We regularly review the position with our Treasury team.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, one final question. It's in relation to the provision of sandbags, which has obviously been discontinued. In the report, if I read it correctly, I think it said the proposed saving there was £5,000. Is that correct?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
The only reason I ask is that seemed quite low, in that it's in my ward at least, it was always a well-used service, and I would have assumed the cost was higher than that. And if it's not, I would suggest reinstating it, given the benefit vis-a-vis the cost.
So our understanding is that was the total budget. You're right, it doesn't feel very much, but that was a saving that was agreed during budget setting last year.
Because if it is if the cost is around £5,000, I would propose strongly reinstating that service, because I know in my ward, for example, it was always very well used. There are particular areas that are prone to flood risk, and I think obviously you do have decisions to make when it comes to financing certain things that aren't necessarily within the council's core objectives, or the council's core services, I should say. But the point I would make is, for a cost as small of £5,000 out of a £300 million revenue budget, I would suggest that that's value for money, and it would be worth reinstating if that is the cost to the authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and that's definitely a question for Environment and Regen, as falls under their portfolio, I think. Do we have anybody else who'd like to ask some questions? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody. So tonight we were asked to review this report, which was the projected revenue outturn for 23-24, and note those proposed environments for the increased energy costs in council buildings, and there was a correction to the funding for adult and children's services. So that report was for noting. So if we can have a hand to move. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Okay, so if we now move on to agenda item 7, which is report of the Director of Corporate Resources. This is capital monitoring for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of December 2023. And I think we have Tom with us. No, we've got Matt again. Sorry, Matt.
That's all right. So just a couple of slides coming up to introduce this item now. So this is the quarter 3. Just lost off my screen. Just bear with me. So this is the. So we go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So this details progress of the capital programme to the end of December, so the 3rd quarter position. The approved programme is £103.7 million, and the work across in putting this report together is a revised forecast outturn projected of £96.8 million. The spend to the end of December is £48 million. There is slippage being taken forward into 24-25 financial year of £7.6 million. So still an ambitious programme to be delivered to the end of the year. Certainly what we did see last year, 22-23, was a significant amount of spend in that last quarter. It's always difficult to forecast, though, especially with that sort of arbitrary 31st of March cut-off point. The next slide, so the Appendix 1 details the financial progress at the 31st of December by scheme basis, so quite a detailed set of appendix for you, and Appendix 2 by directorates and the changes from the approved budget at, as final proposals in February 22-3. Movements in year, including slippage and additions, and demonstrates the journey of the revised forecast outturn for 23-4. So the detail behind that summary table in the main body of the report. Schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends and slippage, and there's a significant amount of challenge goes in from the team to our service managers on the delivery of their schemes, and as a consequence of that, slippage of £7.7 million has been requested in this quarter's report. The report also details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers, which are detailed in Appendix 1 of the report. And there is really strong governance around the programme and the way in which we record and monitor that which is very positive. The next slide, again, people were familiar with this from the work we did on the capital programme that came to Cabinet and Council last couple of weeks. We did find that there were limited resources available when we were bringing forward bids for 24/5, and we actually have had a second review of the capital programme to make sure that those could be brought forward. So what we certainly found that there were high priority bids that had been submitted, and we needed to make room for those in the existing programme and reviewing a number of schemes to be removed. That wasn't an easy process or decision to take, but in the context of the risks associated with not providing additional funding for the high priority ones, it was the right thing to do. So the schemes proposed to be removed from the programme total just short of 800k, and the 23/4 programme, and £10.7 million across the remaining 4 or 5 years of the programme. The removal, and we've had some discussion about this previously, of the budget for the new household waste recycling centre. The council is continuing to explore options for replacement centre at Landau, but despite the ongoing investigations, there are no immediate options available. Interim measures have been taken to upgrade the road and secure a lease for the near future, and the exploration of other opportunities obviously is continuing. The report did highlight a couple of schemes that are being delivered in 23/4 programme, Porthcurry Country Park, improvements funded by Welsh Government grant and a Brilliant Basics grant funding, and the Court Beale multi-use games area in Penarth, which opened on the 4th of October. The report requests to make several amendments to the current capital programme. Some of the large amendments highlighted below. So there's the inclusion of a scheme to enable payment to Transport Wales around the Barry Railway Depot scheme following completion of the site transfer. And there's a reprofile of the Band B, Uscaladerry and the City Deal scheme in the 23/4 and future years capital programme. And certainly there's been a number of instances of the latter being reprofiled. There aren't any significant issues in relation to corporate performance and report and resources schemes in the capital programme this time round. So that's just a brief intro to this report, colleagues.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Okay, committee, do we have any questions for Matt on capital monitoring? Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Cadet, I then.
Sorry, Chair, it was very quiet in the room. Just a couple of points. Hopefully Matt will be able to help with, but perhaps not, as I was concerned about the empty housing grant in point 2.52. There's an expectation of a budget of 931,000, but it says that we're reducing the amount by 846,000. Is there any understanding about why, around the lack of demand for this grant? Is it a lack of promotion? Do they come late in year? It seems odd, as it's a council policy aim to bring empty dwellings back into use, to see this having so little take-up. So it'd be interesting to hear any detail that we have about this. And then 2.46, a lack of expenditure again on the Barry Regeneration Partnership Project Fund. Is there any reason that this money isn't being spent? And why this is being renamed as Vale Regeneration Schemes? The reason I raise concerns about the change of name is because, of course, Barry's about to receive additional funding for town regeneration, but I'd like to ensure as a council in Barry that the money already earmarked for Barry doesn't slide elsewhere, that the money that's earmarked for Barry is spent in Barry. Why that money wasn't spent this year. And the third and last question that I have relates to 2.42, the OVO bikes. There was a budget of 200,000 in the capital programme for this year, under the sponsorship of the Shared Prosperity Fund. And that same money is grant funding for next year, but because of problems outside of the control of the council, the money wasn't spent this year. Are we expecting that money to be spent next year? Or is there something else of use which could be done with this fund? Thank you. Hopefully those make sense.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I'm not sure, Matt, if it's possible for any of that to be answered today, or if you'll have to go back to officers.
I will unfortunately have to go back to officers for a bit more information on those. So on the empty housing, I'll ask the question about why we're not getting the grant requests coming in and what more we can do to promote them. On the Vale Regeneration, I'll ask about why the name change and the switch in resources. And on the OVO bikes, I do sit on the board that allocates out the shared prosperity funding, and there have been a number of discussions about the OVO bike and the proposed contractor no longer being able to deliver the project. And the discussions that have been taken to place are trying to identify a like-for-like scheme at the present time. So possibly that I know colleagues in Regen have been continuing to explore that. So I'm sure I can provide a bit more of a detailed response on that too. So I'll do you a written response to the committee on all three of those.
That's lovely. Thank you, Matt. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. And bear with me, I'm going to be a little bit off piece, but since Landau was mentioned, we will go there again. For the life of me, I still don't understand why you don't contact the Welsh Government and ask if you can have some land or rent some land on Pickerston. There's a brand new road going to there. The land isn't used. They want to rent it out. As the Landau recycling site is for the Western Vale and not just on any one particular, I think it makes sense to contact the landowner who wants to rent property and rent it off them.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. And please rest assured, just as a member of a rural ward, what happens at this particular recycling centre and you know the pressures that both myself and Councillor Stallard are putting on environment officers to try and get this sorted is quite great. So I will definitely be taking that back personally to Miles about the Pickerston land. Anyway, back to Matt because he was going to come in on that. Thank you, Matt.
You've covered that very well, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
And Chair, if anything I can do to help with communication with the people on the site, on the camp, please contact me. I'll do whatever I can.
Thanks ever so much. Okay, do we have any other questions tonight on this particular topic? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you, committee. So the recommendations, again, this was a report for us for noting. It was that progress made on the delivering the 23-24 capital programme be noted, that the use of delegated authority as set out in this report be noted, the use of emergency powers set out in this report be noted at Appendix 1, and that the changes to the 23-24 capital programme be noted. So if we can have a hand to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock Edwards. Okay, so we'll speedily go through our agenda now. Number 8, which was the Oracle implementation, we've already deferred for a special meeting. Agenda item 9 then, that's the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q3 for performance 23-24. And I think this time round we might have Tom. I got it right.
This is me this time. Thank you very much indeed. I'll just give you a brief overview of the item if I can. As you say, Chair, this is the Q3 performance against the annual delivery plan for 2023-24. Within the report, at paragraph 2.2, there's some information around the fact that we've temporarily reviewed the way that these reports are put together. Committee members will remember at Q2 when we were discussing these that we'd temporarily not put the RAG statuses in against actions and measures, and that I undertook to go away and try and get those to be possible back in for Q3. Unfortunately, due to some of the pressures that we've had within the performance team, that hasn't been possible, but I can confirm that that will be the case for Q4 as an end of year position, and my apologies to the committee for doing that. So in terms of the report that you've got this evening, members, the presentation in the appendix follows the format of showing you the achievements that have been made within the remit of your scrutiny committee, and then importantly identifies areas for improvement which are aligned with the exceptions that you'd ordinarily see highlighted with RAG statuses, some emerging areas of development and activity that might have happened since the service plans were published, and also some emerging areas of concern as well. So just to quickly take the opportunity to run you through some highlights from those sections. In terms of achievements, it's been useful during the quarter that we've established a steering group now to take forward the work of the PSB relating to the work to tackle deprivation within the 3 LSOAs within Barry. We discussed, Councillor Carroll was asking around the work of the Your Space project in terms of relocating C1V, and there have been some movement on that project during the quarter. Committee will note that we achieved age-friendly status for the Vale, and an action plan is now being put in place as a result. The report in linking with Wellbeing Objective 2 talks about some of the investment made by the Shared Prosperity Fund. There are some examples here around employability support, and that links with some of the work that as an organisation we've been doing as well in terms of improving opportunities for apprenticeships and traineeships across service areas. Committee will also note that the report makes reference to the £25,000 cost of living grant that was funded from the cost of living reserve. A report was brought to your committee recently relating to that, Chair, and funding will now be awarded to a series of successful applicants during this quarter. We've also continued to work with Glamorgan Voluntary Services to maximise the use of grant funding to support and target areas of deprivation across the piece. And finally, the report in terms of Wellbeing Objective 4 talks about the work of Project Zero, and as a committee you've recently had a detailed report on the challenge plan relating to that. The presentation then goes on to talk about areas for improvement. As I mentioned, these are drawn from things that that need to be given some extra focus now as we go into the final quarter of the year. So there's some reference made there to a continued focus on delivery of the savings schemes, the further work that will be done to upskill the workforce in line with the digital strategy, indeed relating to the question that Councillor Carroll asked earlier relating to artificial intelligence and new skills for the organisation. And we also also need to progress the move towards a corporate landlord model for the way that we manage our property within the organisation. We also want to continue to do some further work on improving the number of apprentices and formal apprenticeship schemes that the council is making, as well as working as part of the regional Amplifying Prevention Board with a particular focus in the final quarter around improving the uptake on issues such as bowel screening with older residents and childhood immunisations, particularly focusing in on the Pencoitra school cluster. The report, in order to make sure that we can keep this at pace with what's happening, because we're aware that service plans obviously get written at the beginning of the year and lots of things happen thereafter, we ensure that we put some information in terms of emerging areas of development and activity. So there's reference here made to strengthening the public participation in budget setting and also progressing a data strategy development, as well as working with local colleges, the infrastructure upgrades to BSc2 to support people into employment, and also taking forward the investment strategy. We continue to look for external funding to support the development of council and community assets. The report makes reference to some Welsh Government funding that has been attracted and is being spent on upgrading community centres, with work currently underway across a range of decarbonisation schemes in those community settings, and also the work that needs to happen in terms of delivering the carbon management plan, and that will be brought to your committee members within the next couple of months. Finally, in terms of areas of emerging concern, Matt has talked about the significant budgetary pressures facing the organisation, and that clearly has also an impact on ensuring that we retain a resilient and engaged workforce. Work is underway to deliver the effective scrutiny action plan in partnership with elected members and colleagues, with a need to continue focus on that, as well as making sure that we are aware that the availability of external funding to support activities around some of our critical challenges, for example, the cost of living crisis, Project Zero and organisational resilience, is diminishing. And just finally, the commitment to be net zero by 2030, there's a particular emphasis of our emissions within the supply chain, and that's clearly something that we need to take action to deliver. That's a really quick overview of the progress as at Q3, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any questions for Tom on this Q3 performance review? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Chair. I always wait to see if somebody wants to jump in before me, but everyone seems to be shy, perhaps. Thank you very much, Tom, for the report. Hopefully we'll get the traditional format back to see the KPIs at the end of Q4, and this will be useful. Obviously the last part, looking at concerns, includes a number of points which are starting to become apparent to us recently, in particular the fact that because of the cuts, we're becoming more and more dependent on our external grants to meet some of our core aims, and this concerns me in the context of Project Zero more than anything. If these are non-statutory matters, last night I was in a presentation by Susanna and Helen Moses to discuss this, and to discuss in particular Scope 3, which in terms of procurement and supply chain, and I suggested to the staff to speak with the chair of the committee to look at the work that we're doing on that task and finish group. Just a couple of points here. Amongst the things that we've succeeded in doing are the developments with regards to Celt Plus and Pod, which are based in Broad Street. What will be interesting for me, and I don't know under which scrutiny committee this falls, but it will be interesting to look at this project, compare with previous projects working in the same field, because I am concerned with apprenticeships and development, that there is some element of reinventing the wheel. Projects starting, running for a number of years, and then something else starting up with a bit of a fanfare. So I just wanted to understand how the success of the current one compares to the previous ones. So thinking about Inspire to Achieve and so forth. What was the other one? The two for people under 16, over 16, and how it works with Llamheim, how this changed, and perhaps this might already appear in papers or other papers, but it would be interesting for us as a committee to understand a little bit more about this and the work that's happening there. Obviously, the review of street names and monuments has been part of work for almost 4 years now. So it'd be nice to see some development in that area. Where can I find out more around the review of corporate landlord? What exactly is the meaning of that description? And lastly, I just want to confirm where it says delivering the PZ Learning and Engagement Plan. Does this refer to Project Zero? Just noting, I raised a quarter ago, of course. This helps to understand narrative, but there are a number of things which verbs which don't tell us much. Progressing work on the medium-term financial plan, supporting and monitoring the delivery, taking things forward, continuous focus, seeking improvement. They all sound nice, but I don't know what sits behind it without going through all of this. So I understand the capacity problems in the department, and I'm pleased to hear that it'll be resolved, and hopefully we'll have something to get our teeth into in future, because at the moment this helps with narrative, but it's not that helpful with analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Tom, come back in.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, and definitely by Q4 the RAG statuses will be back in play, because I think it is important, as you say, that you have the quantitative data alongside this more qualitative information. The point that you raise in terms of concern of being more dependent on external funding as a result of reduced budgets, absolutely, I think we would share those, and we've got some work happening reporting to the Strategic Insight Board, though, about looking at how we can make sure we're as aware and making as best use of external funding opportunities, because there is a role to play for those, and especially when we're looking at some of the things that perhaps we wouldn't prioritise ourselves directly, but if we can get some of that external funding, and I think the decarbonisation schemes within community buildings is a good example of that, where it's not our core business, but actually if we can attract that funding, that's a good thing to do to support those groups. Thank you for the suggestion. Colleagues did mention to me earlier around the procurement task and finish group and the ability to make some connections with Scope 3. think that's really useful for us to follow up, and I can confirm that Matt and myself are doing some work with colleagues across the region as part of the ARDL procurement arrangements to look specifically at Scope 3 emissions and where there are opportunities to reduce those. I can certainly take the point away where you were referring to CALT and the pod, that potential to be reinventing the wheel of projects and looking at how these compare in terms of impact and outcomes. I think given that they've got an employability aim, that perhaps either Learning and Culture Committee or perhaps the Environment and Regeneration Committee, given its role as part of the Shared Prosperity Fund operation, they might be equally useful, but happy to discuss. I can certainly get progress update in terms of the review of the street names and monuments project. I know that's been something that has been delayed, and I'll get an update for you. In terms of the corporate landlord model, if it would be useful, Councillor Johnson, and if committee would be helpful, I can share some information separately relating to that project. Currently, we're developing a business case that basically looks at, we've currently got a model of devolved ownership, if you like, of council assets across a variety of different directorates. That means that quite often there's duplication. They might not be being used in the most coordinated way, and sometimes the repairs and maintenance wouldn't be prioritised in the same way as if they were done by one central service. So we're currently investigating the potential to create that centralised service that should drive productivity and efficiency savings as a result. Apologies for the typo being left in terms of P0. It's just something that we use internally. It should refer as part of that learning and engagement plan to Project Zero, which is the internal communications programme we have with colleagues to make sure that they're understanding the work of the council in decarbonising.
Thank you, Tom. And yes, I'm more than happy as chair of the Task and Finish group looking at social value and circular economy in our procurement strategy to help wherever we can. I mean, hopefully when the Task and Finish group have finished their work, there will be lots for you to consider and hopefully to take on board to work on those Scope 3 emissions. And I'd like to see that report as well, if possible, on the centralised corporate landlord service that you're looking at. That would be really helpful. Anybody else got any questions on this particular one? No. I mean, it is. I'm a little bit concerned. I know it's an area of concern, but the retention of staff and how we improve our staffing offer in light of our figures on the staff and the percentage of staff that we're losing, it hasn't actually been this high for quite some. Well, I don't think looking at those the details we had earlier in a report, we haven't had a 10% reduction quite so high. I don't think it's ever been quite that high, has it? So, yeah, that is something that that we do need to look at. Councillor Franks. Oh, hang on, Tracy's come back. Tracy's come back first. If you don't mind, I'll just let Tracy speak, and then you can come back in, Councillor Franks.
Thanks, Councillor Prothero. Just to come back, if that's okay, in relation to that. So we do actively monitor our turnover statistics, and we're very cognizant of the fact that we've seen a higher rate most recently. We report regularly via HR dashboards to all of our directorates in terms of turnover statistics, and we also report on the reasons behind it. We're very aware that sometimes through exit interviews they may not always be undertaken, and therefore we're looking at the best approach to adopt in terms of improving that aspect, so that we can actively look at why people may be leaving and how we can mitigate that as best as possible. Some of the activity we're doing in that space at the moment is to review the reward offering, and that isn't to increase, we're very aware that there's no new money here, but basically to communicate better what our reward offering is and the value of that to our staff groups, for instance. That's just one area that we're looking at in terms of turnover statistics. We're also looking at our working environment, for instance, how we can improve learning opportunities through the organisation, and how we can improve engagement and participation rates. For instance, we very recently held an International Women's Day event. We had feedback directly from that, and we're actively acting on that feedback across the coming weeks. So I'd be more than happy, Councillor Prothero, to provide further updates on that at future scrutiny meetings, if that's something that you would value and welcome. And we would welcome any opportunities or feedback from this group on how we can continue to improve and mitigate any staff losses, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes, that is helpful, and I think committee would really appreciate further updates on your efforts in this area. It's a very competitive market, and I know that there are lots and lots of local authorities in exactly the same position as us, so it's not a surprise. And I wonder, with areas, especially like we've been talking digital today, haven't we? IT specialisms, I mean, they're prized, and whether we need to start looking collaboratively, growing our own, as maybe we've done with social workers and support workers. We just need to kind of like focus, I think, our efforts, and I think collaboration is probably the way to go on this. Councillor Franks, please come in now. You've got your hand up, Councillor Franks. No, you've gone now.
How about that?
You're back in the room. Lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Correct me if I'm stepping over the boundaries, but I was interested with your comments about staff recruitment and retention. Would any future report cover staffing in schools? Because that is a major concern, and not just in the Vale, but beyond. And if it is not part of our committee, presumably it would be lifelong learning. I'm looking for some guidance.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Let's see what Tracy has to say. Are schools not really our remit, Tracy, or is that something that...
No, I'm happy to provide statistics in relation to schools, and what we're looking to do is there's not a problem with that at all. So, not from my perspective.
Excellent.
Okay, Tracy, Chair, thank you very much. I'm glad I had the courage to raise this matter now. It is of great concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Okay, do we have any other questions about this particular agenda item? No? Okay, that's great. So if we move on to our recommendations, which were that committee consider the Q3 performance results and those remedial actions to address areas of underperformance and tackle the key challenges. Views and recommendations then were to be referred to Cabinet for their consideration. I think our views as a committee, we are concerned about what's going to happen with external funding, as is everybody, but we can still, reflect on those reviews. We're happy to lend our support through our task and finish procurement group, if that will help when they're looking at tackling the Scope 3 emissions through the supply chain. We're really looking forward as a committee also to having the RAG ratings back in place. And we're also now going to anticipate a report from Tracy on what we are doing as an organisation to support the recruitment and the retention of staff, including schools. So if everybody is happy with that, then can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. Wonderful. So we'll move then on to agenda item 10. This is the service plans and performance targets for the Vale of Glamorgan's annual delivery plan 24-25. And I think we've got Tom to take us through this.
Yes, thanks very
Thank
much
you, Tom.
indeed, Chair. And thank you to members who've contributed to the development of the framework behind this report this evening, Chair. I remember a couple of years ago we discussed the need to look at how we scrutinise the service plans and target setting in a different way. And over the last couple of years, it's been really useful to be able to have some conversations with elected members about the way that it would be most useful to present this. And this year's report looks to build on that approach further. So the report that you've got in front of you this evening is in effect the start of the performance reporting framework now that the annual delivery plan has been approved by Council in the last couple of weeks. Members will be aware that we've got a statutory duty to keep our performance under review now as part of the Part 6 of the Local Government and Elections Act, and we do that through the quarterly performance monitoring arrangements and then our annual self-assessment. And underpinning that is the activities that are delivered by the Council's 16 or so service areas collectively in order to deliver against our wellbeing objectives. Members have also requested that we make sure that we're bringing you timely information relating to the 3 critical challenges that are outlined in the annual delivery plan. So there's an important need to have the content to feed those reports and therefore to allow scrutiny and decision making as well. So this report provides you with 2 appendices. And I've had the opportunity to brief the committee and the other scrutiny committees ahead of the meeting in terms of the architecture of the report, but I'm aware that with commitments some members wouldn't have been able to make that. So very briefly, Appendix A provides elected members with a list in effect of the service area actions that are going to be taken to deliver each of the annual delivery plan actions. Members will be aware that we've got the 5-year corporate plan that has a series of commitments within it that last the full 5 years. The annual delivery plan says what we're going to do as a council in 1 year. The importance of the service plans is to break down then and show which services are going to be undertaking what activity to help us deliver in an integrated way across the organisation. So Appendix A is structured by the wellbeing objective to begin with, and then it gives you a list by each of the annual delivery plan actions what individual services are going to be doing to contribute. It does this within the remit of your scrutiny committee, so you're not having to pick through reams and reams of information. If you want to see the service plans in their totality, they are linked in the background papers, but we haven't reproduced them as part of your full packs. We've done some of that sorting work for you. So they're the actions that are going to be taken in order to deliver the annual delivery plan by our service areas. And they'll be used now to be translated into team plans and individual appraisals. But complementing those, and this links back to our previous item, there's a range of performance measures which are proposed within Appendix B of your papers this evening, committee. Once again, these are specifically within the remit of your scrutiny committee. There are just over 200 in total proposed within the Council's corporate performance measures framework, and we've extracted the ones that are particularly relevant within the terms of reference of corporate performance and resources. again, because elected members have asked to make sure that we're able to demonstrate progress against those critical challenges, we've made sure that we've got sufficient indicators there around organisational resilience, cost of living and climate and nature. And also in response to feedback from yourselves as a committee and other elected members as a result of wanting to see some indicators about the strength or the feeling and sentiment of residents. You'll see that there are a range of different measures being introduced or proposed to be introduced in order to make sure the resident voice is stronger within our framework. And Appendix B is structured in effect in three sections. The first is looking at existing performance indicators where we are adjusting the target or setting the target for the coming year. Then there's a list of those that are proposed to be included as new ones within the framework. And as you'd expect, we go through and make sure that the framework is appropriate, and therefore some are being proposed as being deleted. So that's a really quick overview of the report this evening, but myself and my colleagues are happy to take any questions that members have on specific actions or specific performance indicators.
Thank you very much for that that overview, Matt. Councillor Carroll, I see you've jumped in. Would you like to ask some questions? Thank you.
Yeah, it's in relation to the performance indicator regarding corporate complaints. I note that it's proposed to reduce the target percentage of dealing with complaints within a target timescale. I'm not sure that's a particularly good way of addressing that, i.e. we're not meeting our targets, so let's reduce them. I think that potentially you'd be better off putting in place measures to ensure that those complaints are dealt with, because I think that it's all very well bringing the target down so that then when it comes to reviewing performance, we can say, yes, we've hit our target. But ultimately, if that means complaints aren't being dealt with in a timely manner, then from a service user's point of view, the outcome is less satisfactory. It's obviously very good for us sitting in a committee going through and saying, oh, yes, we hit our target this year, we missed it last year. But I would prefer to see the council look towards changing its systems to hitting that target rather than just bringing the target down.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and that's a very fair observation. Tom, we haven't managed to hit the target, so we brought it down. Is there a reason, science behind that? Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you, Councillor Carroll. I think it's a point well made, and I certainly take the views of the committee on how you would like to see this target being set. I think the point that my colleagues are proposing here is that they're still looking to set a target which is an improvement on the performance that we've experienced recently, because it is important, as you say, Councillor Carroll, that we continue to strive to resolve complaints and certainly respond to them from our residents quickly. I want to be able to set realistic and achievable targets that are still stretching. Obviously, it's useful to have committee's view this evening, and I think just for some reassurance, the team are proposing that review of processes and systems would happen in parallel, so it wouldn't be an either or.
So if you don't mind me asking, Tom, what's preventing the council from hitting the target at present?
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. I can certainly send you the information that was in the recent report that went to Governance and Audit Committee that gives a range of different reasons. And to be honest, it is a range of different things. One is capacity. Sometimes there's some compliance against using the actual systems that we have in place to track and manage complaints, because this is linked with the ability for us to respond within certain thresholds of timescales. So sometimes it's use of systems and a recording error. So there's a range of different things, but I can certainly provide committee with the link to the annual report that breaks that down in a little bit more detail, if that's useful.
Yes, I think that would be useful, Tom. I mean, I get that sometimes you're not going to resolve every complaint. I mean, I'd like to see that happen, but I get that we do have to be, there does need to be an element of realism in this. However, just looking at the target, 75%, that's 3 in 4. So we're not hitting 3 in 4. To then bring it down even further to 65%, I personally, and I get that you're putting in place measures to improve our output on this, but from a personal point of view, I would prefer to see the target remain at 75% at the very least. But I accept that's probably going to be a minority view on the committee. But that's just my stated preference.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. The only other thing that I neglected to mention was that there is a second indicator that is being proposed here around the satisfaction of our residents with complaints. Satisfied with access to services. And that would include complaints. One of the things that I think might be useful for me to do, as well as the complaints dealt with within target timescales, is have a conversation with the operational manager for customer relations about whether we actually include one around the satisfaction with how complaints are handled as well, because sometimes it may be that we take longer to deal with something, but we do it properly and somebody's satisfied. So as you say, maybe actually a measure of both speed and the satisfaction from the residents' perspective might be useful to give the committee a kind of rounded view of performance on complaints.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Tom. I think that's very sensible, and I'm glad to see that it's being taken forward. Thank you.
Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone other than Councillor Johnson will be sad to hear I have plenty to say on the matter. First off, to agree with Councillor Carroll and his point just then, I think that's vital, is that we're not reducing targets to hit them. This is an important point, and if we're looking to, in the long term, increase capacity, we want to reach that target anyway of 75% in the long term. So that's what we're looking to do. Second, I just really want to actually thank the officers for answering my long list of questions that I submitted before the scrutiny committee, because they have very much helped, especially on this item, with understanding of the reasoning behind some of the performance indicators and the specific actions taken out within the report. I do want to highlight a few points and perhaps bring some recommendations in. First off, I wanted to agree with the recommendation already within the report to remove the social media reach as being part of the performance indicators, as this is a bit of a crude method that we have been using for some time, which I don't think has been reflective of the actual position of our comms team, bless them. However, regarding some of the new performance indicators, there's some good stuff there. I do wonder if there are some other performance indicators we could add within that report, such as the number of members of the public that we are proactively engaging with from the comms team online on social media, because that has been one of the improvements from social media of the comms team recently, has been proactively engaging with those questions that have been raised by members of the public, that has been frustrating some of these members of the public, that they haven't been answered because we haven't been going and answering them just because they haven't specifically been asked to us at this time. So that would be an interesting thing to see. Additionally, regarding wellbeing objective 1.4, if I can grab my notes very quickly, I do wonder if perhaps we can improve how we're thinking about the quality measures that we're using as the performance indicators. So like the new one regarding BAME representation in our consultations is good, but there is work that we can do in a non-controversial way of actively promoting equality within the Vale of Glamorgan, such as the White Ribbon Pledge, for example, that we have been using as in the past as part of our violence against women and girls strategy to improve awareness of sexual harassment, including in the workplace, and any kind of abuse of that nature. So different measures, such as perhaps how many members of staff, councillors, members of the public we get to sign up to a pledge such as that, or even the expansion of anti-discrimination networks such as GLAM within the council, and the quality of the engagement we're getting back from them, that would be really good performance indicators to see how we're actively promoting equality within the Vale and within the culture of the council itself, that we're just not seeing back. The performance indicators currently on wellbeing objective 1.4, I don't think have been representative of the work that we've been doing. And also the number of events that we had, such as the International Women's Day, need to be measured just even in a very crude way, just to show the work that's being done there and to see how we can improve on that. Finally, I wanted to raise on wellbeing objective 4.1 the fantastic new performance indicators on Project Zero being taken forward regarding the reduction in emissions across the board. I want to ask about the targets that are going to be set for those new performance indicators, because they have to be in line with the carbon reduction management plan when that comes to us, hopefully at the next ordinary meeting of this committee. They have to be in line to make sure we are reaching our duty to hit that net zero target by 2030 within the organisation. And so I wonder what the targets are going to be and how they're going to be developed. I think that has to be in line with the carbon management reduction plan, and also the current performance indicator CPM 153, which is about non-domestic building and the reductions in emissions from those buildings within the council. The current target is only 3%, which is not adequate whatsoever to reach our Project Zero goal. So I hope that target is reviewed and increased dramatically in order to be in line with those objectives. I've very much used up my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom, do you want to come back in with any of Councillor Goodjohn's suggestions there?
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, for the suggestions, and thank you for supporting the removal of some of those social media reach targets that we've been using previously. The world of algorithms has changed the way that that works for us now, so that's useful. So thank you. Certainly, I'm very happy to go away and explore how we could maybe look at quantifying that proactive reaching out and engagement with our residents. With committee's permission, I think it might make sense if we did that piece of work across the year as part of the Participate programme, with maybe the opportunity to bring a performance indicator in if we can really tightly define that ready for the next year. I think the suggestions that you were making, Councillor Goodjohn, in terms of it being important to demonstrate the progress that the organisation or the council is making in terms of diversity is a really strong one, and I think the question for me prompted whether is that an indicator and a target, or actually is it a series of actions within services that, together with some of the indicators of performance, together would give you a picture of the work that is underway. And that's obviously a question for yourselves as committee. There are a large number of actions within the relevant annual delivery plan action that are being taken, and I would expect that things like the White Ribbon Pledge and other opportunities in that way would come through as part of the narrative within the report, rather than maybe having something that is purely quantitative. But obviously we'll take the views of committee on that one. In terms of the wellbeing objective 4.1, those targets relate to carbon reduction, as you say. During year one of introducing them into the framework, we'll be establishing a baseline of performance, so we understand where that is. With many of those, however, they will be being drawn from the work we're currently doing on the carbon management plan, and also that we collect the data as part of the return to Welsh Government annually on our carbon emissions. So there will be the opportunity for members to see the performance rates of those measures currently. I agree with you that they need to be stretching targets. We had a conversation at the Project Zero Management Board this week about the need to, in the carbon management plan, set ourselves realistic targets, but those that are stretching, in order that we focus activity in the right way. And that's the reason for this suite of indicators being suggested for yourselves this evening.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Absolutely, please do.
Yeah, I just that's good to hear. And specifically some thoughts for next year. I hope the specific points on targets for this year, with the recommendation on 4.1 is actually taken forward this year, because I think delaying that would be unfortunate. Although I recognise for the new indicators, a baseline does need to be considered, and especially before we see the carbon management reduction plan itself, and that's agreed that we can't really use that yet. So that's a good point. Just regarding equalities and wellbeing objective 1.4, I see what you're getting at regarding the work as an action. However, often with these actions that we're using, we're seeing things such as a wellbeing plan or a wellbeing strategy being used, and equality strategies being used as what we're developing to take forward, rather than anything specific. And that's tough to scrutinise, specifically because we know the good work that goes on. However, there's nothing being committed to a lot because of resources and what wants to be focused on in that particular year. But having a set of agreed across the council equalities measures that we could use year in and year out would be positive to see how much we could improve those specific measures. What they are specifically, that's more tough to quantify. What we want to focus on is that BAME. You'd have to have a range between BAME and LGBT plus, along with women's equalities measures. However, I do think that's an important point to have in here, because we're being asked to look at how the council is improving a wellbeing objective, particularly this one regarding equality, and our measurements for how we're improving equality just isn't there quantifiably. We've got the actions, and that's nice, but are we improving? We don't 100% know. So anything that can be done towards a quantitative measure, such as signing people up to a pledge, having people attend events, that would be good to see. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And perhaps if committee would like us to, we could go away and have a look in the annual equality monitoring report. There's a series of similar kind of quantitative data looking at a range of impacts, both internally and externally to the council in this particular area. So if it would be useful and committee would be happy for us to do, I can certainly look at whether we can draw some of those out to supplement what's already in the report, and then perhaps we look at how we can develop some new ones as well as we go through the year, because I certainly take the point that at the moment we're only proposing 2 and there's a huge range of work underway.
I would support that, yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow on from that discussion and some of the points that Councillor Goodjohn made. And that is, whilst I accept that actions and such as events and people signing up to pledges is going to add to demonstrating the good work that we're doing as a council, I want to sort of, I suppose, throw caution that they are nevertheless just actions. And I think that we need to be clear as to sort of what we are actually putting down as a performance indicator. And that is, are we just going to be happy with people signing a pledge or signing up to an event, attending an event? Because for me, it's what happens next. That's the indicator of whether we, we've met that performance objective, which is, have we got, are we seeing a change in the culture, a change in the ethos, or sort of a wider engagement around specific issues. So I'm just, I suppose, throwing out a cautionary note around. And I think Tom's already highlighted that, these are actions rather than performance indicators of what we are doing or what is sort of what we are achieving. And I just think that we need to be a little bit clearer in terms of the differentiating between an action and a performance indicator of what we've achieved. And that's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just going to butt in very briefly. I noticed Councillor Lovelock Edwards' audio and video was a bit, there was some issues with it. I just wondered if it might be worth leaving the meeting and rejoining very quickly in order to see if it improves.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. Chair, we'll just pause a sec, if that's okay, just to make sure that Councillor Lovelock Edwards can rejoin very quickly, just to finish the tail end of that question.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Chair?
We can hear you, Councillor Lovelock Edwards. Your audio's still breaking up, but we can, not your audio, your video's still breaking up. Your audio seems to be clear.
I know the one time I want to speak and my video goes, I've clearly got just a face for radio. I don't know how much you captured of that, Chair, in terms of as a committee being clear with Tom in terms of differentiating between an action and the performance indicator that we're looking for in order to properly evaluate and scrutinise whether the council is meeting its sort of not just its obligations but sort of reviewing how the progress and having an honest assessment in terms of where we are going from an equality perspective in relation to that particular point. And that's I don't want to sort of belittle the work that's already been undertaken, and as a champion for older people, I'm more than aware of the fantastic work that has been undertaken. But signing a pledge or attending an event is an action, it's not necessarily changing anything. So we need to be clear as to what happens after that pledge is signed, after that event has come to an end. That to me would be more of a performance indicator. And that's the only point I wanted to make.
Hi, Chair. Sorry, I thought your screen froze for a minute. Can you still hear us, see us?
I've been called.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Carroll's come on screen now. Did you want him to come up now and speak, or did you want that other comment addressed? I just wondered what.
Can everybody still hear Councillor Lovelock Edwards? Or is it just me?
Not right now.
Not now, Chair. We did hear her
Right.
earlier on. It was just a video was breaking up.
I can hear her. She's still talking in my microphone.
Right, that might be a bit of a delay then, Chair.
Delay,
She has
delay.
actually stopped speaking.
Okay. She stopped now.
Oh, it's fine, Chair. Okay.
Sorry. Has Tom been able to reply to what Councillor Lovelock Edwards was saying?
No, not as yet,
Did
Chair.
you get that?
If you obviously Councillor Carroll's waiting to speak as well, so I don't know if Tom, did you want to, or let Councillor Carroll go first, Chair? What do you want to do?
Well, as long as Tom got the gist of that, then yes, of course, Councillor Carroll can also.
Yeah, it's just to follow on from what other members were saying, because I note in the document that it talks about on one of the equalities points about percentage of council employees from minority ethnic communities. Is that a proposal to implement quotas?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I think it's the 3.8% off the top of my head, but I'd need to have a look. No, it's not about quotas. It's drawn from the Welsh Government's Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan as a target that public sector organisations ought to be looking to, making their workforces representative of the communities that they serve. We're not considering employment quotas in terms of different of people from different ethnic backgrounds as part of this. This would be achieved with some of the work that Tracy was describing earlier in terms of attraction and retention, in terms of the way that we position the council, the way that we advertise our roles, the way that we phrase our job descriptions, the way that we design our employment offer, and the way that we talk about those things, so that we would positively promote those opportunities to a wide range of people from all parts of the population in the Vale. So it's not about quotas, it's about having a target to work towards in the same way as we would do with other things in the framework.
No, the only reason I say that is because I am a believer, and I think that when it comes to providing services, you need to employ the best people for the job. And I think that advertising roles and making sure that they're promoted is absolutely the right thing to be doing. But if we're selecting people on the basis of having certain characteristics, I don't think that's right, and it's not something that we should be doing. So I'm reassured about the point on quotas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Tom, I don't know if you are able to respond to what Councillor Lovelock Edwards was saying.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor Lovelock Edwards as well for the points. And I think between what Councillor Goodjohn was suggesting in terms of wanting to make sure that we've got an appropriate level of targets and measures for some of the equality and diversity related activity, and as Councillor Lovelock Edwards was describing, the need for those to be linked with action, but that action to have a meaningful impact, and it's the meaningful impact that we're looking to try and measure, that I can go away and do some work to look at both the annual equality monitoring report, because I think there are some things that we could draw out that would be indicative of progress, for example around gender and ethnicity pay gaps, for example, that perhaps we could be putting into the corporate framework. I think you'd find that useful as a committee. But there may also be other measures that we could look to establish, and perhaps we give some thought to that as part of the development of the next annual, the next strategic equality plan as well.
Thank you, Tom. It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because it's where you start from and how you show progress from where you're starting from. And with this kind of thing, it is difficult. Before I bring Councillor Haynes in, I think we've got Councillor Lovelock-Edwards having another try. So did you want to respond to what Tom has said? Have a go.
Hi, Chair. I don't know if you can hear me. Is that any better? Can you hear me? No?
It's very slow and breaking up as it was before.
Right, it might be worth, oh, sorry, Councillor, but I was going to suggest you turn your camera off. So if try
I
your
just
audio
did
now,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay? If I proceed, I don't think anyone's going to miss this place. I just wanted to follow on with asking Tom for a point of clarification in relation to Councillor Carroll's question and comment earlier. Tom, would I be right in stating that under the Equality Act 2010, there is potential for the council as an employer to look at positive discrimination, for want of a better phrase, in terms of any recruitment and selection processes, and if that meant that we were to rely on the Equality Act in order to encourage a diverse workforce, then the council would have that ability to do so.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I caught most of it. If it's okay with you, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer. I think the provision is certainly around positive action, but I'd want to double check within the equalities legislation. As I say, at the moment, we're certainly looking at some of that positive action in terms of how we position the council as an employer. The recruitment and retention strategies that Tracy is leading on, with a view to being representative of the community as a whole. But I'll certainly undertake to go away and have a look at that bit of the Equalities Act. You probably know it better than I do, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. It was quite difficult for everybody online there to hear what was being said because there was a bit of a delay. So we had both Councillor Lovelock-Edwards and Tom talking at the same time, which was tricky. Councillor Haynes, over to you.
Yes, just a quick thing, really. We've talked about diversity a lot here, and we tend to totally exclude the one group all the time, and that's the disabled. I think it's worth mentioning them, particularly when you mention pay gaps. They're the people who have the largest pay gap, or least pay gap, whichever way you want to look at it, but and the easiest to help, strangely enough. So I just thought I'd chuck them in so we haven't forgotten them. We should consider every protected, I forgot the word now, characteristic. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Haynes. And if committee were minded to make a recommendation that we should make sure that there is full representation across the characteristics in the performance indicators that you receive, I'd be very happy to do that. And I know that committee will see that there's reference throughout the actions that we'll be looking to take. Certainly, I'm looking forward to receiving the report from Welsh Government on Locked Out, which specifically looks at issues that people with disabilities experience, and also the work that the council. I'm very proud that we've been able to establish a network for staff and their allies with disabilities called ABBLE in recent months. So absolutely, you're right to say that diversity is a very broad range of things.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Councillor Haynes. Yes, that was a really good point made there. Do we have anybody else who would like to raise a question? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I'll give people a moment to put their earphones on. A couple of points that we've discussed. To some extent, it's proven the earlier point about the use of KPIs and the fact that we as a committee, we prefer the quantitative as opposed to the qualitative. I'll turn firstly to Appendix A and the two things that I wanted to consider in terms of how this is used. Often to me, I feel as though there's a use of contributing to or working with. For me, I find this difficult because at the end of the year, you can't use this as a way of deciding whether the council was successful or not. If you are continuing to work on something or continuing to work with somebody, how do you prove this in a sensible and easy to understand way? It's easy to decide on some sort of target for this, so an explanation of we're going to work with somebody or contribute to something, it doesn't help me to understand whether it's been a success. So we've had this conversation before about how we look at the annual report, because it's not an easy way to prove. If there's not an easy way to prove whether we've reached the target, this then can cause problems. So I'm going to ask, in spite of, although it helps us to understand the process, I will ask Tom to consider in future how the wording can be framed in a way which would make an action or an intention apparent, as opposed to we're going to continue to do what we did last year. For me, this doesn't work as part of this report. This other thing, only now and then, just referred to one. There's a little bit of, quite a bit of jargon used at times, which appears here. And perhaps it would be better if we can unpack some of the acronyms being used, or a wording to explain exactly what ABLE is, which is part of ADP 7, or what is a Section 16 forum. I take it that quarantine occupation health refers to a company called Quarity, but I'm not sure. Even things which are familiar to us, it's still useful. ACL, I take it to be adult community learning, but this isn't fully clear, so sometimes we just need to unpack the jargon to make sure that the explanation is effective. We've talked a lot about in attachment B or appendix B. I don't want to repeat any of the points, but I do want to note how it feels for me that on the one hand we're talking about decarbonisation targets, which are valuable, but then again there are targets or a lack of targets in relation to some environmental issues, which makes me feel a little bit sad in terms of whether we're reducing the work in the field or the resource which is available. And this is more and more in terms of the cleanliness index. I take it using leans, and the fact that we're getting rid of green parks as a KPI because we're going to ignore the award entirely in future. The fact that we're hoping for 5 beaches to be awarded, but at the same time we're allocating less resource to all of this. So this is quite sad, actually, to consider these two things in the same context, and just to note what a change in a target for the amount of space that the council has for wildflower seeding. I've lost that area now, but there's a target changing from how much in terms of kilometres. WO 4.3, protect, preserve, enhance where possible, environment, culture and heritage, and it goes from a number of square meters to a percentage target. So I just want an explanation from Tom, if not now, then in future, perhaps, how this will work in terms of the traditional comparison. What is 5% of all of the space we have? Does that make sense? That's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Tom, would you like to come back in on any of those points?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. If I maybe take them in reverse order, if I can do. I'll certainly go away and find out the answer to the move from square meterage to 5%. I don't know off the top of my head, so I'll certainly find that out for you. I think it is interesting, as you say, that the balance of indicators changes throughout the year, and your observation around a reduction in some of the ones that we've had for a series of years now around things like green flag parks and the movement in on some of the decarbonisation ones, showing, I guess, where we're having to allocate resources and an effort in different ways, given the circumstances that we're working within. I think you're absolutely right to call out the issue around jargon and some of those acronyms. I think this obviously comes from our service plans, which are in effect the business plans of those areas of the organisation, and they're very used to talking in those kind of terms. But when we get to pulling them certainly into the performance reports that you'll have on a quarterly basis, really important that we make sure that the language is as accessible as possible. And absolutely, I'm very happy to go away as you suggest and ensure that we are as specific as we can be in the language. It is always a challenge with these kind of plans to make them both inclusive in terms of integration of a range of different council services, but specific enough then that you can hold people to account for the actions that they're taking to contribute towards things without constantly using the word contribute to. But certainly it's useful feedback, so thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do we have anybody else who'd like to ask a question or pass a comment on this report? Anything? Okay, that's great. Right, okay then, committee. So the recommendations were that we review and endorse the planned services activities relating to the remit of the committee, and that we review and endorse the proposed measures and service performance targets for 2024-25 relating to the remit of this committee. I think we most definitely did that, and there's quite a bit that that committee members have contributed to this particular and supported all of those endorsed reviews and measures. So if we can have those comments and the suggestions, which I know, Matt, Tom, you're going to take those away anyway, reviewed, that would be great. I don't want to single out any recommendations because I think they're all really valuable and useful for Tom to take this forward. So can we just move on that? I think we'll leave it at that and say that the comments and the views are to be included in our recommendations. So can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Okay, so we are now moving on to agenda item 11, And these are items which the chair's decided are urgent, part 1, and we don't have any of those. That takes us then on to the part 2, which is the press exclusion in accordance with the section 100A of the Local Government Act. And we don't have any items that I've declared that are urgent in part 2. So after a long but really good debate, I hope everybody's enjoyed this meeting. I have. I can just tell you that the next meeting date is Wednesday, the 17th of April at 6 o'clock. Before then, though, we will need to call and convene for our special meeting to give that Oracle implementation report the due attention that it deserves. So we will be coming out to committee with that particular date for you all. So thank you for your participation and your patience, and I hope you have a really pleasant evening, or what's left of it. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.